Jason, I want to thank you for coming on here, first of all, because I love talking about these fields. These fields are ever growing and ever changing, and especially I think being a professor at a university of the subject lends to a unique experience. And I'd just love for you to first introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Jason Bolte. I am currently actually the director of the School of Music here at Montana State University. I'm a composer and a music technologist and collaborator. Yeah, enjoy writing a lot of music for electroacoustic music, as well as collaborating with folks in the arts and the sciences across campus.
And one of the first things I wanted to ask mainly is, you've had a long journey in music, and I feel like when you spend so much time from being maybe a child or teenager getting interested in music all the way to going to school for it and then teaching it for many years, all the way to being the director of music at Montana State, I kind of wanted you to share like your first experiences for music and specifically, technology, music technology. I think that's a part that many people don't think about when they think of music and its evolution throughout time.
Sure. Yeah, so personally, my musical journey probably started with my father. My father is a musician. He actually has he has a bachelor's degree in music education, but spent most of his time in music playing in country western bands. So my first experience with that type of professional musician really came from him as a musician in a local country western band in the early '80s, late '70s, early '80s, and getting involved in music in that way. It wasn't it wasn't that I discovered music technology until I was in high school, which is probably not the case anymore. I would say most folks who discover music technology may discover it a little bit earlier, but I didn't discover that it was even a thing until I was looking around for college degrees. Was involved in music in high school and also was really interested in science, physics, and that type of thing, and discovered that there were these degrees out there where you could combine both of them. Uh, so, uh, Applied, investigated a few, and wound up studying at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, where they have a music technology program, and it actually set me on some very interesting pathways because going to school as an undergraduate, I think I really wanted to be a studio recording engineer or doing live sound reinforcement or those pretty, I think, standard things that you might think of when you think about music and technology, especially at the time in the early '90s when I was studying there for general population. And while I was there, had some really wonderful professors and discovered that I really enjoy writing music and exploring sound. And that's kind of led me into a variety of different areas. But wind up, yeah. And then I discovered I enjoyed teaching, so that's where I am.
Yes.
So in some ways, where I wind up is ingrained in the pathway that I took from my first exploring music and discovering that possibility of being a working musician through my father, uh, through my undergraduate studies and my graduate work, and figuring out, I really enjoy teaching and I really enjoy the sound stuff. So why not make a career out of it? So I feel very lucky to have that sort of career and be where I am. Yeah.
It's a unique pathway because music technology studies didn't, I don't believe, have a very long history as they didn't start offering degrees until I assume it was the 70s, 60s around there. And I find that interesting also because, music is something that has been taught since the beginning of human history, it feels like, but the technology of it and the evolution of technology in general as a whole throughout human history, I think has led to that. And I kind of wonder as well, I'm interested as your time as a student in music engineering technology. I wonder if that shaped the way that you view being an artist in a technical medium and has influenced the way that you write music now.
Oh, definitely. Um, it the my undergraduate degree program was one of those that was designed in the late '80s, and really took off in the '90s. It's changed a lot at that
Mm.
university since then, but it was the degree was a conglomeration, we'll say, of a variety of different areas. So there was a recording components, live sound components. So those sort of audio engineering type of activities. There's also a large composition component involving electronic synthesis and sound design, plus a very traditional music component where I'm a trumpet player by initial study, I guess. So, my undergraduate really focused me on the idea that I don't just enjoy music, I enjoy making sound and I think and applying sound to different situations. So I think, yeah, I think my undergraduate experience has had a huge impact on what I do. And where I am and how I create today. Um, Most of the music that I write is generally um, influenced by electronic media, whether it's I write a complete electronic piece or an installation, or even if I'm working with an acoustic performer, there's generally some sort of influence from electroacoustic music or electronic music in there somewhere.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too, especially being in the area that you are, which is the North American Mountain West, which I think traditionally is a very acoustic playing field when it comes to music. And I kind of wonder as well, having a majority of your compositions be in that electric acoustic
Mhm.
area, how does your environment, being the American Mountain West, and geography play into your composition? And is there like a melding of the two? And I think it's really interesting because I think it's a very interesting part of the world, part of America, the Mountain West. I think it's a defining part, and I kind of wonder how that has played influence into your uh, composing.
Yeah. So initially, I grew up in Indiana, very different place, and spent a lot of time in Kansas City, which is
Mm.
also a very different place.
Yeah.
Than moving out here. It's when I moved out here for the position here at MSU, I it was a huge change. It was a different environment, a different setting. Um, when I was at in Kansas City, it was a metro area that had more people living in the metro area than the entire state of Montana, uh, which is huge. It's a very big difference, and I think you can't avoid when you move to the West and you move to a more of a rural setting, you can't avoid but engage with that setting because it is what it is. If I live in Bozeman, Montana, and if I
Nice.
if I move out of the city, there are places 15 minutes away where I lose cell signal because I'm
Mm.
up the mountain somewhere and I'm isolated. So I think for me, I at first I probably avoided it um,
Mm.
and sort of concentrated on creating work that was really interesting that still had a lot of influences from where I was prior in Kansas City and Indiana. But there came a point where it was like I couldn't avoid where I live. Um, and I wrote a couple pieces that were based on sonic materials that I recorded in the area up Highlight Canyon, which is a beautiful access point south of town, which I just went hiking in very recently. Um, and that openness, that space, the sonic, the quiet but not quiet, those details that are available no place else in the world besides in that sort of high mountain west in the United States is something that has influenced me and continues to influence me in my composition. There's other things too, but that's a huge thing that I've sort of explored in the last couple of years for sure.
And I think as well, being a part in a very rural and isolated area, um, I wonder as well in return when it comes to beginning new tracks, what's your usual starting point now? Is it from concept, texture, sound, emotion, place? I think, and before you answer that, I think what's really important here is that I think our environment really influences how we create, whether it be for music or whatever it may be. Um, because as time goes on and as we stay in places longer and longer, I think it has a mental change in how we think and how we go about creating. I think it changes our life and our routine. And I wonder like how you start now and ha has it differ from since you've been to the more rural Mountain West?
Sure. That's a great question. I have to think back on some things. You know, I don't know. That's a really good question. I'm not sure it's changed how I start things.
Mm,
Um, it's definitely changed what I do um, in sort of creative activities. And reflecting on it, it definitely has changed what I do as a composer and as a creative artist. Um, when I lived, I'll make a really quick thing here. When I
yeah.
lived in the city and when I lived in Kansas City, my interest was really about texture and timbre and quick moving rhythmical activities and all these very and you can listen to the music that I composed, in the early part of this century, and I think you'll hear it on there. It's and maybe that did have an impact on where I lived. I never thought about it that way, but it was very visceral. It was very emotional. It was very I would say even fast music in a way,
Yeah.
um, with a lot of complexity. I think I would describe it that way. Um, and the more recent material, and it could be the space. I don't know. It also could be
Yeah.
just changes in me. I don't. It's hard to describe, but since I've lived in Montana, I've written several long form ambient pieces
Mm,
that are more, I think, reflective and looking inside. Um, Material that's simply based on one sound. I've done several of those are one setting. Where prior to that, I would have been mixing in a whole bunch of different materials from different areas, and yeah. So I guess in a way it has changed. Living in Montana, living in the West has changed the way I approach composition as a whole. Maybe not how I start it, because I always start with an idea um, that is sparked by something.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
it could be just simply traveling, in an environment or hearing something. I'm like, that is the coolest sound I've ever heard, and recording it and doing some manipulation. So it's not always how I start things, but I think it has affected, now that I think about it, how what type of projects I take on, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And going off what you said, I actually find very, very interesting because um, when I was growing up and when I was in high school, I got really into music technology. And when I first arrived at the University of Colorado, I was originally a recording arts major, and I was in that playing field, and I ended up switching to film and television and theater production as time went on. But originally what I wanted to do with my life was to compose and to have that background in music technology. And as part of the reasons why I'm so drawn to your career and your interests and your music. And I find that really interesting because when I was growing up, I grew up in a rural town in northwestern Colorado near the border of Wyoming.
Okay.
And a lot of the music that I composed at that time was very long and drawn out and very very slow compared to some of the things that I've heard now since I've been here. Most of my musical focus has been within film scoring, and so a lot of things I've done then have been film scores. That's a beast that I can tame to most of my discretion. But I find that really interesting because that's what when I lived and when I grew up in my life in that rural area, that's all I found myself able to do, and I found that was the most compelling stuff to compose. And I still I have a lot of those roots inside of me. Um, and I find it really interesting how in your ways it's been the opposite, how you started out with the more faster compositions and more it was more technical and complex. And now that you've been here, you've made more, long and drawn out ambient tracks. I think it's really cool because I think that reinforces of kind of like what the Mountain West is. It's very long and drawn out, and the sounds kind of drone
Hmm.
in the outside areas that I've listened to, and it's a very distinctive soundscape, and it's very reassuring sometimes. It's also off-putting in some ways how isolating it can be. Um, one of my most fascinating stories I think I have was visiting some of the Native American reservations in New Mexico. And some of those areas are so interesting. I think their soundscapes are no different than of the places around it outside of the reservations, but still, I think it has an interesting complexity as long also as well with the history of uh, of ethnic music from tribes from New Mexico, in Utah, Arizona, and even in Montana. I think they have a distinct sound. I think there can be interesting things mixed in it as well. And I just find that really interesting how the West kind of has that similar feeling that other people have felt in created sense. And as well, speaking of that, I think one thing that I also think of is sound source. And you were just talking about as well sounds that you've recorded and kind of modulated with and messed with. And I kind of wanted to ask as well, what are some of the most unconventional sound sources that you've recorded or heard, seen, and or used?
Sure. Wow. Yeah. I mean, unconventional is an interesting word. You know, within music, I think, and sound design, I think there's just a if it can be if we're going to record sound, anything is fair game. And
Interesting.
I really do think that that's true. Um, most regularly occurring sound to me, it has pitch, it has structure, it has timbre, it has rhythm. All those musical constructs that we all that even folks remember from grade school and middle school, general music courses are there in almost every single sound. Right now, there's a lawnmower going on outside my window. You know, it has pitch.
Yep.
In fact, it's moving back and forth. I don't know if you can. You probably can't hear it. It's a little bit further off, but it's got a Doppler effect that's going on.
Yeah.
It has some stopping and starting. Um, he just stopped. So it's got rhythmic structure in there. So for me, anything is fair game. The weirdest or almost, huh? So I've used a lot of. I mean, my pieces generally have a creative work has a can be involved in a lot of different things. I've used my hand rubbing on my pants and recorded it,
Mm.
and used that for a piece, and it works really great. I don't know if you can just sort of perform your pant a piece called Friction, but it's there's those opportunities where you can just take material that is available to you or record it, and especially in the electroacoustic environment, use them for all those standard sort of activities that we find that can happen in a more traditional instruments such as a flute or a clarinet or that type of thing.
And that's a really good point you make because I think as time has gone on and gone on, I've noticed, and I think other people in the world of music have realized that music and sound are scientific in a way. And I also have the belief that music is math in some ways, and we're constantly dealing with numbers and the way that the world works within sound and rhythm. And that's a very broad spectrum. But I wanted to ask as well, since you've worked with physicists, I what I find really interesting is that they're two different fields, but I think they correlate to each other a lot more than we think. And I wonder, what do you think musicians and composers can learn from scientific disciplines and vice versa also as well?
I mean, you're right when you talk about how, of course, when you talk about how sound and music really have, they have deep scientific ways we can describe them.
Yeah.
Uh, they do. Going back to ancient Greece, Pythagoras, and all this stuff, and how we define the harmonic series and that type of thing, which has a huge influence on all the music. I feel that you know, on let's say a vast majority of the music that we have seen in the last however long. Uh, it's. one thing I think it is fun to work with scientists is that they approach music in a very different way and approach their work in a very different way, or can approach it in a different way than creatives sometimes do. Now, I'll also say that the physicists that I've worked with have been exceedingly creative people, and because of the work they do, they have to be.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a different side of the coin, working with folks in the sciences. It's especially when you have the same sort of goals. It's approaching it from different angles, with the same creativity on in that collaborative relationship, but just in different language. I think that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing that I've noticed is it's hard sometimes when I'm working with scientists or when I'm working with folks in other disciplines to have a common language. Um, and that can be difficult. Just what are we talking, just common language of even just what we're talking about and what within their research or my research or their scholarship and my work, um, working out those language relationships on what do you actually mean when you say this is a big deal. Um, and I think that's one of the most interesting things I learned from my collaboration with scientists and computer scientists and physicists and neuroscientists is that bridging that gap between what I understand in their discipline, because I don't understand a lot, because
Yeah.
you know and trying to find some common language between what I know and what they know and what they know and what I know. So yeah.
Yeah, and that is a really good thing to think about is, what language that we use, and also our backgrounds can differ, and people just have completely different mindsets about going about things. And I think also what that entails is that different types of directions end up happening as time goes on, and as time goes on, the future progresses, and I think as well as the future prevails, I think electronic music and electronic music as a whole, I actually believe, will be ever evolving. Electric acoustic as well, I think, is going along with that. As like I've said a lot of times on here already, technology just keeps progressing, and I think. I've wondered if you notice anything interesting as current directions of electronic and electric acoustic music have continued on. Are there like trends or certain technologies that you've seen that are recent that are interesting, exciting?
uh sure. So it's where some of the things in my career, in the short span that I've been doing this,
Yeah,
uh, you know, the what I would love to see, and I think this is kind of with classical art music, but also in sort of the popular DJ sort of set,
yeah.
is the and those type of activities is I want to. I'd love to see, and I'm guilty of this as well, but I really enjoy seeing live performance in electronic.
Hmm.
And that's something that is difficult to
Yes.
do, and do it well and do it musically and do it so that it is can be interactive with an audience. Those are the big things that we hurdle over. And you see it approached in different ways, in different, sort of, genres, however you want to talk about it. It's I am not a DJ, but I've been involved a little bit. That it's a different pathway than what we might see happen within a classical music concert. So, you know, as electronic musicians, we're trying to create an environment that's similar to the experience of other musical environments that are inherently have, what would you say, agency. You can see what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, so if I have a rock band up there, or a cellist, or a string quartet, when the violinist makes a movement, there is a resulting sound that our brain goes, yeah, of course, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Or electric guitarist on stage, or keyboardist, or a drummer, they're playing, and the resultant sound is something that we can relate to the physical movement that we're seeing, or the physical whatever that we're seeing. Electronic music and electroacoustic music has physical problems in it because we don't, not all the time.
Yeah.
I can be playing with a controller, a push or something else, and I hit one button, and all of a sudden, this entire symphony pops out. Or
Yeah.
how does that physical relationship compare to what I just did and the sonic relationship that developed? And I think that's the thing that we struggle with as that we all struggle with, no matter what we do in electronic music, is how do we, as performers, as composers, as creators of this genre and this music and this sound world that we love, when we perform it live, how do we translate the limitations that we have? And those are, I mean, that's a big thing that I would love to be able to do. I'm still working on it. I don't think we're there yet, but there's a lot of controllers out there now that can help with that and help with those types of things. But it is one of the quirks of what we do in electronic music and electroacoustic music is, well, how to express that physically when I'm performing live, how to express the same type of emotion, the same type of urgency, agency that a cellist has when they do something on their instrument. How do I do that with electronics? And there's various ways to do that and various way to explore that. But I think that's the biggest thing that I would love to see us continue to develop in this genre. The other thing, of course, is I think right now in the world of audio, and basically audio in general, is immersive
Mhm.
applications, whether it be Atmos, or whether it be ambisonics, or one of the other less one of the other formats that are available out there. I think it's something that where I think everybody in the industry, whether in the audio industry, is still sort of trying to figure out and struggle with, whether it be for music, or whether it be for media or film or whatever. It's just it's it's a new area that I think it'll take us some time to figure out. And it's not necessarily
Yeah.
new. It's been around for a while, but we're still trying to figure out what to do with it, especially in music. Film, I think, has, of course, some advantages because they have a visual, as you know, there's a visual content which really describes the sound that is probably going to be included and how it's going to be placed in the three-dimensional field. But for music, it's abstract. There's no visuals. So how do you do it? And there's some great examples out there, and then some that I don't think are so great. But it's trying. We got to figure it out, and it's going to take some time.
Yeah, I also think, going off what you said, that it takes a incredible amount of skills that people need as musicians and other things as well to be able to go over those hurdles, because I think musicianship is a very difficult task that is not very rewarding in some ways compared to other fields. And when I say not rewarding in some ways, I think it's very hard for people to really stick with it.
Hmm.
And I think it's one of those things that requires a unhealthy amount of dedication at some points within one's life. And I also believe some of those foundational skills are in the early ages of learning musicianship. And I think that could be someone as a child learning the piano, all the way to someone in high school learning an instrument, to being in college. And the question I then want to ask for you specifically is, as you are you know, a a professor of music at this university, what are some of the skills that you believe are essential for young musicians and composers for entering the field of specifically music technology?
Sure. That is also a very difficult question. I think it's evolving.
Yeah, I think it is as well.
It's so I think I don't think that I think there should not be any barriers to entry to create music. Um, I I think that, and there are in a variety of different ways. I mean, we can go and look at K through 12 education in the United States. There are a lot of places, and that once you make that decision in fifth and sixth grade, there is whether you want to be in choir or band or orchestra or not. Um, Unfortunately, you have to make that decision in fifth and sixth grade, and there's not a lot of entry points after that in some situations. Um,
Yes.
I think we as a music educators in the United States or in across the world need to look at that pretty hard, because it doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah.
There are options and creative ways that people who make a different decision in fifth grade and decide, nah, I want to do something else for now, can come back and do that. And I think one of the ways there's a variety of different ways to do it, but one of the ways is through technology, whether it's MIDI or sound synthesis or those
Hmm.
type of things. It gives some great input into how to be into music, and give a pathway for students to continue on studying it as a profession or as a hobby or whatever on earth you want to do. To me, music it's one of the things that makes us human. Um, and it's been going on in our species for millennia.
Mm.
And it is without it, we're no longer who we are. And I
Yeah.
think we need to make sure, and that goes with a lot of other things. That includes art and visual art, and that includes higher level thinking and emotion and all these other things. But music falls into that category. And it needs to be accessible, and the opportunities to learn about it and to create it need to be available at a variety of different levels. So what going back to your original question about what do musicians need to have going into this thing? I think they need to have the desire to learn about sound and music. I think they need to have be open to learning about different types of music or different things that are a broad spectrum within the study of music,
Mm.
um, and the ability to set forth the amount of time it takes simply because music, visual art, photography, sculpture, you name it, it's a practice. It's not, you don't, I mean, it's something you practice every day. And I think that word is really important there is it's not something that we learn about and then we use. We have to practice with it. So if somebody is able to put in that practice, I think that and have those interests and be willing to sort of spend the time to learn it. I think music is one of those areas where if you have the time, and you have the drive, you can be successful in it. As a career or as a hobby or whatever you're interested in doing. That's
The
my personal opinion.
Yeah, and well, first of all, I think the first part of what you said is true enough that's true. And I think,
Unfortunately, at this point, but we're got to work through it. Yeah.
yeah, because I think, I remember. Like I remember when I was in fifth grade and sixth grade, I was put in the band and I hated it. And I was like, you know what, I'm not doing band. And I made that choice to not do band because I never thought I'd want to do music. And then when I graduated from high school and decided to go to college for music technology, even though my music technology program was largely on computers, to be expected. A lot of classes were ear training and music theory, and that was stuff I had no idea what to do. And it was part of the reason why I had to switch. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really big problem that I think a lot of people and a lot of younger people are facing nowadays is that there's not many points to go back and learn that stuff because I think it's true for anything that's easier to learn when you're younger. Languages, music, those things are easier when you're younger, and that's why so many kids join band then and it sticks with them. But a lot of people have been in my boat where they just didn't have the back exits to go back and relearn it because you can't. But even then, it's very hard to even get into those classes in college. They're not really there because you're kind of expected when you arrive at these institutes that you already know those things. And I don't blame them, but also at the same time, that's really discouraging for some people.
So things are changing. Um,
Yeah.
it changes. The academia, unfortunately, sometimes can be a slow-moving behemoth.
Yeah.
But then it also, it is, at certain institutions and certain universities. I can say here at MSU, we've made a lot of changes in the past 5 years that allow those students who, especially in our music technology degree, who may not have those experience, and actually all of our degrees, um, who want to study music, who may have not had those experiences in band and theater and those type of things, to have a point of entry. In the going back to the Mountain West, there's a lot of space here, and there are a lot of people that come from very small schools. I'm not sure how big your high school was, but in Montana, it's you could graduate with 5 students in your high school class if you were in a certain area. It's
Yeah.
the amount of people that are here in Montana is like 1 point, I think 1.1 million at this point over the entire state. So there are high schools and school districts in the state of Montana that are exceedingly small and do not have the opportunities that some of the larger, more, we'll call them urban, but larger urban cities in Montana have, like Billings or Great Falls or Missoula or Bozeman or even Whitefish, um, where there is an established music program that is very highly successful. If you're in a small town or a reservation, you may not have those same experiences. So for us, being we're the land grant institution here at Montana, educating those citizenry is really important. And we've been working on ways to be able to, for students who have those, maybe not have those really strong experiences, to come in and be successful. Um, it's higher education and it is about having students come in, no matter, in my opinion, no matter where they are, and having an entry point so that they can be successful. Now, again, it's always going to take work. Um,
Yeah.
but I highly think that higher education should be available to everyone, and there should be programs designed for students who may have less experience in music. Because you're right, when I was in school, God, I'm gonna date myself, which I probably haven't done, but when I was in school in the mid to late '90s, when I graduated from high school, it was exactly how you were saying. There were expectations that, okay, you already knew this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, this was already expected. If you needed a review, you needed a review class, not
Yeah.
not a not a college level class. You need to take this other thing. And I think that's changing. I think that's changing in the United States and in the higher education institutions, especially at the state schools. The
Yeah.
with funding and opportunities in K through 12, unfortunately, sort of dissipating a bit over the past 20 years because there's been a less of an influence on there, or less of a priority there. State schools have to look at those options and see what's going on. So I think it's a really important thing to look at across the spectrum of higher education is, why aren't we, why do you have to have these experiences in high school in order to be a successful musician? You necessarily don't. Um, so that's my outlook. I don't know if that's helpful.
I
Um,
think it is though, because I think it's allowing people to get into positions that they may not have been to if they were born in a
yeah,
different era. And I think that's really cool. And I think that shows that the world does change. If even if it may be at a snail's pace, it does. And it allows for more entry points for it allows for more entry points and opportunities. And and I've also wondered, how how much, how much being a student of music has changed over time. And I wanted to ask you, as the director of school of music at MSU, how do you, I mean, I think there is a diverse amount of people who go to Montana State, especially for music. And I wonder, how do you approach fostering creativity and experimentation with music within your students, and what topics do you really go over? And because I think it's different in different areas of the United States.
sure. Yeah, it's so we do offer three degrees here at MSU. We offer a Bachelor of Music Education, which is really designed for those students who want to become music educators. And we need more of them for sure. Where there's a shortage across the nation for music educators, so we need more of them. Um, and then we have a BA in music, which is more of a general degree, but most of the students involved in those are interested in performance or composition and that type of thing. Uh, and uh, um, and then we have a music technology degree, which is really broad based music tech degree. And actually, all our degrees are broad degree programs. And I think that's for us at Montana State, that's what makes us a bit unique in a way. Our education program is broad because it's required by our licensure. So our students here study orchestra. They study instrumental, band and orchestra education, music education. They study choral education, general education, and they do a little bit of music technology education here as well. But those are all included in our degree program. So it's really flexible and allows students a lot of opportunities because there are those high schools in Montana or grade schools in Montana and grade schools in Montana that are absolutely just simply one or two rooms. So they're doing everything. So it's those opportunities, those that degree program is designed specifically for that. The BA is terribly flexible. Um, there's a lot of flexibility in there and a lot of our faculty are very good at trying to expose students to a variety of different musical activities because there are so many different career options that are out there. Um,
Yeah.
so, um, because it's not music education is kind of like, yeah, okay, you want to do this. You want to be
Yeah.
a 12 educator. Great, good to go. Let's prep you for that. Let's make sure that you're able to do that in a wide variety of situations. The BA in music is, those students are graduating with a solid foundation in music, but they're also graduating with minors or double majors or these other areas. And I think that's a really important thing because it does prepare them for other options that are out there outside of the traditional sort of performance activity or composition or graduate school. And I think that's a really important thing. I personally, I really like these very flexible programs that allow students to study in areas that are interest to them, and maybe interest to building a career after graduation. Um, I mean, there's nothing wrong with a Bachelor of Music in Performance or composition or any of those things, but I think the opportunity for students to have a flexible degree and discover some other options outside of music and reinforce what they want to do within music in those areas is a really, really great thing. Uh, so we force students to try some different things out because it's in their degree program.
Yeah.
The music technology program is really, again, it's a broad music tech program. So those students have opportunities to study composition, electronic music, film scoring, media. They do a experimental visual music class. So they're also doing studio work and live sound, game design. So those just to name a few. So it's we want our students to graduate with a variety of different experiences so that they can continue to learn because studying at a university is not necessarily the end all to your education, and it shouldn't be. It should be a starting point um, where you can focus in on some areas, but develop a career outside of after graduation that allows you to continue learning. One thing I think it's that's kind of interesting about music technology is because just like some of the other science areas, is because everything is changing so quickly, you have to be a engaged, continual learner. You can't just stop. Um, you can't just stop with learning about, whatever version of Pro Tools that you learned,
Yeah.
because Pro Tools is going to be around, but who knows? It might not be. I've gone through several DAWs in my time
Yeah.
that I was using that are no longer here, or they've been subsumed into some other software activity. So, or they just went bankrupt. you know, so it's the technology is always changing. So I think the biggest thing one of the biggest things a university can do is to instill that idea of that we are lifelong learners, and that what we learn at the university is a starting point
Mm.
and just the beginning. There's going to be plenty of other things to learn afterwards. Even with those of us with a doctorate, that's just the start. It's just the starting point. Even for us that have advanced degrees, there's just so much out there that we could learn and need to learn and need to understand, for to educate our students and to be able to interface with what's going on in the world today. So.
Yeah, and I think as well, to go off what you were saying, it's a really good point because I think as time goes on, you know, music technology evolves with softwares and hardware tools and plugins and things just change. And it's a really good thing that you bring up that like you've gone through multiple DAWs and that's just something that I think a lot of students in technology specifically are very adherent to. And I
Hmm.
have been as well.
Yeah.
Because you get so used to the way that you get so used to the way that one thing works.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
And then it's hard to go from that.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting thing. And finally, one last question I wanted to ask was, what's some of the main things, some of the foundational uh tenet blocks, as well as advice to people who want to merge music and technology
Hmm.
and how to sustainably be successful within that field of music technology and how to make sure they have a very lifelong career. And I
Sure.
think it's hard for people. And the reason why I asked that, and it's also a really good final question to me, is because it's becoming a more popular thing to go to school for. There are trade schools specifically just for that, and a lot of colleges are now offering more music technology, audio engineering, science degrees, and it's great. And very new it's a very new subject to a lot of people. And colleges 20, 30, 40 years ago did not ever have programs of that. And
They were different.
they were different. And I think also, there was a time where it was analog and now it's digital. And I also think at the same time as well, people will go to school for these things, but not know what to do afterwards. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's a really important thing to talk about.
So I agree. There has been a proliferation of sort of audio engineering and music technology degrees, over the past, I don't know, 20, 30 years. Um, and why? I think there's the reason why is because there's interest from students. That's
Yes.
the number one reason why, is because students are interested. It From an administrative standpoint, it completely makes sense to have those because it does bring in students, and let's throw that out and say, okay, students want that degree, and universities are supplying it, and there's a lot more out there than there were when I was an undergraduate. When there was, for example, in Indiana where I studied, there was an audio engineering program at IU, and there was a music technology program at Ball State, and that was pretty well it in the state, at the time. Now there's probably ten different programs that would be in that category, within the state of Indiana, maybe even more.
Mhm.
So there has definitely been a proliferation of those things. I think mostly because of student want and student desire to study those areas. Um, yeah, what to? I'm sorry. Could you? I lost my train of thought and did not write down your question.
No,
I
that's
knew it
that's
was part of it, and I'm trying to
yeah.
rack my brain about what the other part was. But
No, you're completely fine.
yeah,
The one last thing I wanted you to talk about was like how people can go to school for these things now, and
yeah,
it's a lot more accessible. But what do they do after school? What do these people
yeah,
do after school? Because it can be very discouraging.
yeah,
It'd be very hard to get opportunities and careers and jobs with.
yeah, yeah. So I think the some advice I would always talk to students about is, you know, um, number one, be open to some things that you may not think is what you're interested in. Um, there are reasons why, if you're going to a university, there are reasons why programs are designed the way they are. And you may not like this class. or this area, or you may have concerns about, well, how does this class affect what I want to do after college? It's there for a reason, generally, and talking to your professor about why it's there and what that leads to, and how that can be a lead to other areas, I think is really important. Uh, the other thing is, um, do some investigation and look at all of the opportunities that are out there. The music technology is, I think a lot of students come to the university or come to vocational schools or whatever thinking, okay, music technology, I want to be maybe a recording engineer, live sound reinforcement engineer, or I want to be a producer, whatever that term happens to mean to the student.
Yeah.
Uh, those are pretty limiting. I mean, they're really limiting. Um, there's only the field is has limitations. There are so many other opportunities out there within the field of music and the field within music technology outside of those two areas. I mean, you yourself are interested in film scoring, media scoring.
Yeah.
Those activities are definitely someplace that especially since the pandemic, continue to grow. Um, a piece of visual media needs music. That's just how we operate in our society. How artificial intelligence is going to work into that, we'll see.
Yeah.
But right now, I think that's something that is definitely there. The things on the fringes, music business, something people don't think about. Software design, getting a minor in computer science, or majoring in computer science and getting a minor in music technology. Those type of activities. Arts management, every single live performance has taken off here in the United States since the pandemic, and is the main revenue driver for a lot of musical artists. Get involved in that aspect of it. It's get involved in the back end. There's just so many things. Even in a local rural community, there can be you know opportunities for live sound and theatrical productions and all these things that are kind of on the edges of maybe music technology, but are definitely viable. Uh, System design here in Bozeman, one thing that is a pretty large business is high-end system design for business audio systems, AV system design and installation for businesses and homes. We're very close to Big Sky, Montana, which is a very affluent area down there, and many of our students, some of our students get pursue careers where they're designing and installing high-end audio and video systems. So industry representation. All those folks at AES, there's hundreds of them, probably thousands of them in the United States. Everything from the guys at Genelec to the folks that represent Yamaha, um, professional audio, instruments, you name it. Um, those opportunities are all there. So I think thinking about, pursue those goals that you have, because I think those are really important. If you want to do this specific thing, pursue it with all your might, with all your time and everything, dive into it. But also realize that, when you're starting a 4-year degree or a vocational degree, that there are other opportunities within the industry that you may not even know about,
Yeah.
that are out there, and that can be you can have a very successful, lucrative, enjoyable, creative career in. I never thought I'd be an educator, never once. The only educators I knew about were my high school band director and choir director and my college professors. Um, and honestly, the high school thing just did not appeal to me at all.
Yeah.
Uh, but through my study and through going through and exploring these other things, you come up with options that you may never have considered. And that is one thing that I think every student who is or anybody who's interested in starting in this area, music technology, music, whatever, should think about is okay, I want to do this. This is my goal. But what else is out there? What else is out there? I should try all this stuff because now I got the time, and I've got the time at the university or the vocational school or the job training or whatever. If I'm interning or if I've got a part-time job as a live sound, like an working as a at a theater somewhere. Maybe I stop by and talk to the guy at the soundboard. Maybe I learn a little bit about lighting. Maybe I learned a little about stagecraft. All these things are super important. So, yeah, that would be my thing. Is focus on something that you really enjoy, but do take a look at all the other opportunities that are out there because you probably don't even know they exist. Yep.
Yeah, and that's a really good thing that you bring up because it seems often, more than not, people always start out and go to school for one thing and end up in a similar field, but ultimately different than that
Yep.
they originally started. I think that's really cool. So, Jason, thank you for coming on. This was really fun to
Yeah.
talk to you about, and I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me and talk. Yeah, thanks
Cool,
again.
man. Yeah. Anytime.
Awesome. Have a good day.
You too. Talk to you later.
Bye. Thank you.